Hi, for today's lecture, I want to take the flipbook example done in the last lecture and turn it into a little more of a full application. We're going to use this as an excuse to explore a few other kinds of things we can use in user interfaces. For example, a slider. We want to be able to look at the value of what the slider is set at, and things like a menu, and then finally just mouse clicks in general, not on a button, but just on a panel of some kind. So last time we had this flipbook class that was a subclass of a JPanel. So again, that means the flipbook is a JPanel, and you can use it where JPanel is used. It added some data, and then added some surfaces. In other words, it knew how to draw this image on itself. And then to test it, we just put the panel in a standard JFrame, which is a pretty common approach, basically, right? You need to test it in an application of some kind. I'd like to add more to it. I want to add a slider to control the flipbook speed. So as you change that, it should go faster or slower. I want to add some menu items, and then I'm not exactly sure what to do with a mouse click, but we can use it. Maybe if you click on the flipbook, it should pause the animation just for a minute or something like that. So how are we going to do this? I do find it useful. Again, you have to kind of force yourself to think about how things are organized, and making a sketch of some kind is sort of useful. So here's my beautiful thought process. Here's the existing JPanel flipbook. Notice I want a slider next to it. And because I have two things here, there's going to be some kind of layout, right? We use the default layout, it's probably fine. But if there's a layout, there's probably going to be another panel around all of this to hold these things. And so that sort of says there's an opportunity for a class here to extend a normal JPanel and be a JPanel that has all these things inside it. And then the JFrame can have a menu bar. And so we're going to have a little menu, maybe a file quit menu or something like that. All right, so again, sketching it out sort of helps me organize my thoughts a little bit. So let's give it a try. So first of all, let's actually make a new class here. I'm going to have an image app that extends a JPanel. And so this image app is going to be basically not the whole JFrame, but the panel part of it. In this class, I make a JFrame, kind of like we did last time. I had to sort of use that same approach of figuring out where these images were. And then I make one of these new panels, and I add this JPanel to the JFrame, packet, set visible, and set the default close operation. So these are kind of now becoming fairly standard things we do to get a user interface application going. JFrame, add some sort of panel to it, and then these other default kind of behaviors. All right, so what's going to be in this image app? Well, the first thing we're going to need is that flipbook. So I'm going to make a flipbook instance variable, and flip. Almost worth starting this video over again. Flip book. There's a question whether it should be an instance variable or just made and added, and I think we're going to be accessing the flipbook a little bit from different parts of this class. Okay, so then in the constructor for the image app, let's start off by making into one of these flipbooks. And I'm passing these file names into it. Notice in this case, this thing needed that information, so this thing needs that information, and I'm just sort of forwarding it on to who can use it properly. And then I'm going to add the flipbook to this panel, right? So again, that could be done with this dot, this panel I'm constructing, or you leave it off. And I say leave it off unless you need it. Okay, so we have a flipbook, added to JFrame. I don't know, maybe I can run something already. So again, always good to run stuff while you can. Oh boy, yeah. Let me quit. This is sort of disturbing. And it's big too. Okay, so we have this thing now. We have the image app JPanel, and it contains one of these flipbooks. Now let's add a JSlider. Okay, so let's see, the slider we're going to use probably in some listener, so I'm going to also make that and things are kind of offset funny here. I'm not sure what happened there. Format is always good. I'm going to add a JSlider and delay. I'm going to call it delay control or something like that. Okay. And then in our panel, I'm going to make one of these sliders. So delay control equals a new JSlider. And again, we're just using a standard component. We're not customizing it, right? So one option would be just to use some default values here, and when I run it now, this is not going to do anything, but and I haven't even added it to the panel, so it's definitely not doing anything. So I'm going to say add to the JPanel I'm constructing the delay control. Now I run it. See, it's easy to forget all the little steps you need, right? And here's this slider. I'm not actually sure what the default range of values are, so you're actually allowed to set things and you construct the slider. So first of all, I can say I want to make it vertical. And that, maybe fits better on there. Notice this is in the JSlider class. There's some sort of constant that's defined. And then what I can do is I'm actually allowed to set the min value. And so I can treat the slider as the millisecond delay that the timer uses in the flipbook, right? So the smaller number it is, the faster it goes. One could also do a little math and make it like frames per second if you want. But I'm going to set the minimum delay to be 10 milliseconds, so that'd be like 100 frames a second. And then the max to be like 1 second. And this initial thing, like 100, so 10 frames a second. Now, I would say that, again, looking at this, one could sort of infer what is going on here, although the difference between 10 and 100 is probably a little bit bad. But I think it would be well off to make our own constants. Static final int. Let's call it the min delay equals 10. And I'm going to just make a couple of these, right? Max delay equals 1,000. And initial delay, in other words, what I want it to start off at, equals 100. And I'm going to use these in here. So min delay, max delay, and what was it? Initial delay. Initial delay. Okay, so now we have this here. If I run it, it's a little hard to tell how different it is, except that it's vertical for sure. And notice if this goes, that's like 100, to 1,000 here, so it starts there. There are a ton of other things one can add on a slider to get. I gotta close this thing. It's really hard to look at. There's a ton of things you can add, line after line. How to make the little tick marks on a thing, how to put the labels on so it shows the minimum value and max value. And all you gotta do is go Google that and look at some tutorial to do a little better job there. I'm gonna skip over it, okay? But now the question is, okay, I have a slider, and what should it do? And Whereas buttons and a timer use an action listener, some event happened, a slider used something called a change listener. Because the slider changes. And when I do that, of course, I need to implement its method, and has a state changed method here. So one question is, what should happen in here? Well, the only thing that's going to call, well, actually, okay, so first of all, also forget normal things. I need to the delay control, add a change listener. Oh, I did the wrong thing there. Let's add change. It's not going to autocomplete for me now. Change listener. And it's this object that has the change listener, right? I'm constructing an object that implements a change listener. So this object is the thing that has the change listener, and that's the thing that this thing is going to use. So in here, what should happen? Well, I can get the source of it, e.getSource. Notice this thing returns an object type, right? Because it doesn't know what the source is. It doesn't know if it's well, I don't know. I think spin boxes have change listeners. It doesn't know what kind of thing exactly is doing the change listening. So at least we do know what it is. We know the only thing that calling a change listener right now is the J slider. So I'm going to take this thing and cast it to be a J slider. Okay. Now normally you should be a little cautious doing this, because if you get it wrong, like if something else had called this and you say it's a J slider, it's going to crash when it actually runs if I try to use methods that don't exist for it and so on. In this case, the only thing calling this change listener, the state changed method, can only be our slider at this point. And I can use if statements to kind of narrow it down if there's other issues. But I'm going to say this, that I know this thing is a slider, so let's make it a slider. That way I can access its particular slider methods. If it's just an object, I can't really do anything with it, right? So when I have the slider, I'm going to get the interval from it. So I'm going to say slider get value. So that's where the slider is currently set. And I'm going to use that in my flipbook to start timer with delay of the delay interval. Now, I will say I cheated here a little bit. Before, the timer was just made here in the constructor for the flipbook, and there's no way to access it, right? So I made it an instance variable, and then I added some access to that timer. So I can say stop timer, and I call stop, and I can say start timer with some set delay. So it sets the delay and restarts using that delay, right? And so that was not in the last lecture. I added a little bit of it. You have to add some connectivity sometimes. Okay, so what's going on here again now? We added the flipbook, we added the slider, we told the slider to use the change listener in this class, and we added it to the panel. And then in the change listener, we got the object that caused the change and cast it to a slider, because that's all it can be. I got the value from the slider and used that to set the flipbook delay. All right, let's see if I remembered all the different parts here. Always a question. Okay, so it should be like 1 second delay here. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. That's good. And this should be basically as fast, 100 times a second. And disturbing. All right, so slider, I say it follows in the pattern of the buttons and things. It just has a slightly different nomenclature that's used, right? It uses a change event and a state changed and a change listener rather than a action listener. And again, just there's some options when you create a slider, and there's tons of options afterwards to set up other kinds of things about a slider. Okay, so that was kind of fun. All right, we already changed this for the flipbook to give us access. I want to be able to click on this thing and make it stop, just because it is so disturbing when it's flipping back and forth. So there's also something called a mouse listener. Mouse listener, and I have to import that mouse listener, and then there's methods to implement because I'm implementing that interface, right? So add unimplemented methods, and this one actually finally we have one that's not just a single method. The mouse listener has a whole bunch of them, and you don't have to do anything for them, right? You know, maybe you don't want anything to happen on when a mouse is entered. So that's when basically when you enter a panel, for example, it would say that would trigger this event. There's mouse clicked, mouse pressed, and mouse released. Press and release together make a click. Click is sort of recognized as a specific kind of thing. So what do I want to have happen here? I want my flipbook. Yeah, this one's pretty easy. Stop timer. Right, so I'm talking to the component down inside here and telling it to do something for me, and that's all I want to do really, is just make it stop. And I need to have my, well, there's a question of where I'm gonna of where I want this mouse listener to act. I'm gonna have the panel I'm building here, our mouse listener. And who has the mouse listener? I do, right? Again, this is really the panel I'm building, add a mouse listener, and I'm the thing that has the mouse listener, so I say this again. Okay, so I usually forget that as well. Okay, we're bouncing. Here's my mouse. I'm gonna click. Now I should have set it up so that if I click again, it's a Boolean and it starts it again. I'd have to remember what the speed was and so on, but I can restart it by just picking a new value here if I want. Okay, so again, we're making some progress. This is getting a little fancier, a little more full featured, and again, this is sort of an excuse just to show you a few other things you can do in a Java Swing application. Okay, I want to add menus. Menus are a little bit complicated in the sense that they use a bunch of different classes. There is a JMenu bar, there are JMenu items, and there's also JMenu parts of that. So we have to build up a slightly more complicated structure to use a menu, and a JFrame can get a JMenu bar basically. So, all right, what are we going to do here? We have our JMenu that sits inside a JMenu bar, and then there is a JMenu item that belongs to a JMenu. And then if you want to get fancy with your menus, you can add in separators. You can actually make radio buttons inside the menu, checkboxes inside there, submenus. You can add in icons. You can add in hotkeys. So it's a very full-featured thing. Again, you're better off looking at a full tutorial on this. I mostly want you to be aware that these things exist, right? Okay, so how are we going to do this? So I could, for example, make sort of a menu bar in here, but I want to be able to add in an action listener. The action listener, those are buttons, basically, these menu items. And so when you pick one, it triggers an action listener event. And because of that, and because of sort of the complexity of all this, all these layers you have to add together, I'm going to make a new class that extends JMenuBar. And to be honest, it probably is not necessary here to actually make this a subclass. You could just make a JMenu and return it. But I'm going to do it this way just to kind of stick to what we know a little bit better in this case. So I need to construct my image menu. No real information comes into the constructor. Again, the default will be fine here, but I need to actually initialize the JMenuBar part of myself. And then I want to make a JMenu called file menu. So this is the thing that actually sits in the menu bar that says like file, right? That's a J menu. And I'm going to make that as a new J menu with a text file. All right. What do I want to be able to do? I just want to be able to quit the program. There's a lot of things I could imagine doing, but again, just to kind of get the basic idea across. So I need a J menu item, and this thing is going to be sort of the button that gets used in the action listener. So actually I'm going to make this up here as an instance variable, and this is going to be the close item. So it's like the close selection in the menu. And I should make this, I always forget my accessors. All right, so I actually have to make the close item. It is a new J menu item, and it's going to say quit. Quit. All right. To the file menu, I'm going to add my close item. Right, so again, kind of like panels and stuff, we're sort of building up layers here. And then to the menu bar, this image menu object I'm constructing, I'm going to add the file menu. Now, there's no actions associated with this yet. Maybe I'd like to go, again, just try this out a little bit. So I'm going to do that in my image app. And again, you add a menu bar to the frame. So here's my JFrame. And I made it a new image app. And then also I'm going to make a new image menu equals new image menu. And I'm going to say on my frame, I'm going to set a J menu bar to be menu. Yeah, I guess pretty well with my variable name here. Okay, so right, we're making a JFrame. It makes a new image app, which is the whole thing with the flipbook and the slider in it. I add that to the JFrame. And then I make a menu, a custom menu using my image menu class, and I set the J menu bar to be that menu. And if I run this, I'm going to pause it, and then you can't see, I think I'm outside the recording. Okay, too big here. Here's my menu. And it acts like a real menu, which is cool. Now it doesn't do anything yet, right? So let's fix that. I have to go into image menu, and I'm going to implement action listener, and I'm going to add the unimplemented methods. And what should happen in here? Well, it's a little bit cheating in the sense that I could just, there is only one way to trigger this. I'm assuming in the future I'm going to start having a few more items. So I want to use an if statement here. So if the get source is equal to the close item, in other words, if that's the button, the menu thing is a button, then all I want to do is do a system exit and kind of hard close my program. All right, so, and then I need to add to the close item, the action listener. So many steps, really take some practice to kind of remember these things. And it's the action listener that belongs to this object here that's being constructed. So I use this here, right? So again, it helps to keep in mind, make the J thing that you're making. You want to add it to some panel, and you need to add an action listener to it if it does something. And if you do all those things, you're in pretty good shape. So I'm gonna run this again. Oh, slow it down at least. Okay, that worked. That worked with a click, and quit. Hey, a full app basically. So we're in pretty good shape. Now, again, we sort of whipped through a couple examples here. And again, this is sort of just to raise your awareness that certain kind of things are possible and just get a little practice, so, breaking things into classes again, thinking about where these listeners go and so on. For the most part, you should search for a lot of things. There's a lot of tutorials, a lot of documentation, and a lot of it's actually pretty good. And so the key, I think, is having some idea what's possible and then just go see what the right steps are needed to make it happen. And again, you're sort of following along some known example, adapting it to your own use, and things can go a lot better than just sort of, you can't invent this. It's not like a tricky method like the beginning of the semester where you had to think about some clever way of solving a problem. There's no cleverness here. It's really just going through the motions that are needed to make it work the way it's supposed to work. So it's easier in some ways, but there's sort of more little details to keep track of. All right, great.